Welcome to the deep dive. So, when the history books get to the Renaissance, that roughly 300-year cultural boom, we usually get the same list, right? Leonardo, Michelangelo.
Florence, Rome, Donatello, Raphael, yeah, the standard tour.
Exactly. It's like this required stop. But I think if that's all we do, just treat it like a museum piece, we're kind of missing the whole point.
We really are.
So we've dug through the source material you sent over, not just to, look back, but to actually pull out the good stuff, the provocative ideas, the inspiring bits, and figure out how they might genuinely help you tackle things today.
That's the mission, yeah. Because at its core, the Renaissance, this rebirth, it was really ambitious. It was about grabbing the wisdom, the beauty, the sheer potential of ancient Greece and Rome and making it work again.
Driven by humanism, right?
Driven by humanism, exactly, which was pretty radical. It shifted the spotlight off the divine, and put humanity with all its potential and its flaws right there in the center.
Okay, but we have to throw in a complication straight away. Because the sources you gave us show these two, totally opposing views. On one side, you've got this picture of the Renaissance as the moment, the big transition that kicked off the modern world.
The standard narrative.
But then other historians are arguing that, well, for maybe 95% of people in Europe back then, the Renaissance didn't really even happen for them.
Right. And what's so interesting is that both sides have a real point. There's truth in both.
So how do we figure this out?
Well, I think to really get the Renaissance legacy, we can't just admire the art on the wall. We've got to look at what powered it. Specifically, who paid for it all and why they were paying.
Before we even get to the big ideas.
Exactly. Understand the system, the funding, then tackle the ideas and, why it's still kind of controversial today.
Okay, so the money engine. If we dig into that, it seems like all roads lead to Florence. And specifically, 1469, Lorenzo de' Medici steps up.
Lorenzo the Magnificent, yeah. And the Medici Bank, which his family started way back in 1397. I mean, it was basically the financial institution in Europe. Hugely respected.
And what made Florence different, or the Medici different?
Well, a big part of it was their attitude. The upper crust in Florence, especially the Medici, they actually honored the business of making money.
Unlike other places.
Yeah, you didn't have that same sort of traditional Christian suspicion about trade and banking that was common elsewhere. They were good at making money, no question. But their real genius, maybe, was deciding how to spend it.
And they spent a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. Astronomical sums. Over about 4 decades, this crucial period from the 1430s to the 1470s, the family pumped the equivalent of, roughly $500 million US today?
Wow.
Into supporting thinkers, building architecture, commissioning art. They were investing in culture on a scale that's, it's pretty hard to wrap your head around today.
Okay, $500 million, that sounds massive. But let's pause there, because this is where the lesson for us comes in, I think. The sources estimate that the actual Medici family fortune, while big, was kind of moderate compared to today's billionaires anyway.
Yeah, relatively speaking. Their total wealth might be similar to someone who ranks maybe 1,200th richest globally today. Someone like Rosa Cafferata. Made her money in fisheries, maybe worth $1.5 billion.
So Lorenzo de' Medici, the guy funding this incredible cultural explosion, was economically, quote, unimpressive next to a Bill Gates or a Jeff Bezos.
Okay, wait. So if the guy credited with fueling, maybe, the biggest cultural shift in recent history, if he only had the kind of money that puts you at 1,200th place today, that completely changes the story, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because the usual story is you need absolutely insane, unprecedented wealth to make this stuff happen.
Exactly. And this is the key takeaway, I think, for you listening. Money wasn't the problem back then, and it's certainly not the problem now. What was missing then, and what's maybe still missing now, is vision. The secret sauce for the Medici wasn't just the size of their bank account, it was their philosophy about what art and culture were for.
Right. They weren't just, passively signing checks. The sources say they were direct and didactic. They used their money, their patronage, very deliberately. Not just to make things look nice, but to actively promote specific, big ideas. Beauty, truth, wisdom.
It was personal, too, wasn't it? Not like donating to a museum wing today.
Oh, absolutely. Super personal. Think about Michelangelo. He didn't just get a commission. He lived with Lorenzo and his family for 5 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah, ate at their table, joined these deep philosophical chats with Lorenzo's own mentor, Marsilio Ficino. That kind of close intellectual partnership. That's what defined their approach. It was all geared towards producing certain ideological results through art.
Okay, that idea of partnership, of funding specific ideas,
Yeah.
that leads us right into the main intellectual current they were championing, humanism. Can you break that down? Because it's more than just studying, like, literature and history, right?
Oh, much more. Humanism was this huge, ground-shaking movement. Basically, it put the emphasis squarely on the value and agency of human beings.
Shifting from God to humans.
Pretty much. A major shift from theocentrism, God at the center, to anthropocentrism, humans at the center, focusing on life here on Earth.
And this was a reaction against something, wasn't it? Against the medieval way of thinking.
Definitely a direct reaction against medieval scholasticism. The humanists looked at scholasticism and saw it as, well, dry, abstract. Just endless debates about tiny logical points. They felt like the scholars had kind of lost their way.
Got bogged down in the details.
Exactly. So their big rallying cry was ad fontes,
Which means...
to the sources, go back to the originals.
Yeah.
Bypass the 1,000 years of medieval commentary and read Plato, Cicero, Seneca directly, in the original Greek and Latin if possible.
So they weren't just reading different books, they were changing how you even gain knowledge.
Completely. And this search, this digging for original texts, it wasn't just academic. It felt urgent, almost desperate sometimes.
Like that story about Poggio Bracciolini.
Yeah, amazing story. Picture it. January 1470, it's freezing cold. He's in this Benedictine monastery up in Fulda, Germany, rummaging through these dusty, forgotten manuscripts.
And he finds...
He pulls out the only surviving copy of Lucretius's De Rerum Natura on the nature of things,
Which was a big deal because...
because it contained the most complete version of Epicurus's philosophy. A whole way of looking at the world, focusing on atoms, no divine intervention, seeking pleasure through simplicity that basically flew in the face of the dominant Christian worldview.
Wow. So finding that was huge.
Colossal.
Yeah.
And the effort involved, the sheer luck and determination. It shows these guys weren't just, scholars for its own sake trying to get tenure.
Right. Bracciolini wasn't just collecting old books. He wanted Epicurus's ideas about friendship, simplicity, accepting limits because he thought they were needed right then.
Exactly. He was urgently searching for help in creating better ways of thinking for the present, using ancient wisdom to fix current problems.
Okay, so boiling humanism down, what are the key takeaways?
Well, first, that anthropocentrism we mentioned, humans at the center, with free will. Pico della Mirandola's idea that we can choose to rise or fall.
Okay, and second...
Second, virtue. And this is tricky because it doesn't mean virtue like being morally good today. It was more about power, capacity, the ability to shape your own fate, achieve greatness through talent and drive.
The kind of thing Machiavelli would write about in The Prince.
Precisely. That kind of assertive, effective action in the world.
And this had political implications, too.
It led to civic humanism,
Yeah.
which basically rejected the old medieval ideal of the monk, shut away studying. Civic humanism said no. The best, most capable people need to be active in public life, serving the city, the common good. Your talent belongs to the community. And this whole philosophy, this intense focus on human capability and earthly life, it didn't just stay in books or discussions. It literally shaped the cities they lived in.
How so?
Well, when you look at Florence, Venice, Rome, during this period, the people running these cities, the city fathers, they were driven by this quite radical idea that the city itself deserved unparalleled attention to beauty.
So city planning became like a philosophical project.
Exactly. Not just about infrastructure, but philosophy in stone. The core belief, according to our sources, was that we are, to a large extent, shaped by the character of the buildings around us.
So the environment shapes the person.
Right. And if you want a healthy, thriving population, sane, vigorous, happy people, you need to create public spaces that foster dignity and calm. It was seen as essential.
And they were consciously not doing something else. They were reacting against Rome.
Yeah, they looked back at ancient Rome, particularly through the eyes of historians like Sallust, and saw a warning. Sallust hated what he called publici justus privatim opulentia.
Public what now?
Publici justus privatim opulentia. Basically, public squalor and private opulence. The city falling apart while the rich hid away in their luxurious villas.
Ah, okay. So the Renaissance solution was...
Flip it. Make the public sphere itself beautiful, refined, even opulent. The idea was that if the shared spaces were magnificent, the wealthy wouldn't be tempted to just withdraw into their private worlds. It would lift everyone up.
And they had actual rules for this, like design guidelines.
They did. They actually started codifying things, like buildings should generally be around 5 stories high, keep that human scale.
Right.
Squares shouldn't be too vast, small enough that a mother can call from an upper window to her child, playing below.
That's very specific.
Isn't it? and lots of graceful covered arcades so people could walk around, meet, talk, whatever the weather. It was all about designing for a better social and psychological outcome, really holistic thinking.
Hmm.
And that same clarity of purpose, that philosophical mission, is really the key to understanding why the Renaissance produced so much incredible art, so much genius.
It wasn't just random chance, like suddenly Italy had more talented people.
Probably not, no. The sources argue it wasn't some freakish preponderance of artistic skill. It was more about having an intensely clear vision of what art should be, what it was for.
Okay, so what was it for? It sounds like you're saying it was almost like advertising.
In a way, yeah. One source calls it a heroic age of advertising. But not for, shoes or soft drinks. It was advertising for ideas, big ideas. Beauty, truth,
Yeah.
wisdom.
So art was a tool to make those abstract things real.
Exactly, to make them palpable, effective, and life-changing. Take Titian's painting, The Three Ages of Man.
Okay.
It wasn't just a pretty picture. It was deliberately used to get across a philosophical point about how short life is, right? Encouraging people to use their time well, maybe be a bit more forgiving of others.
Or Raphael in the Vatican.
Perfect example. He gets hired to paint philosophers, people like Plato and Aristotle, but how does he paint them? He makes them look like these glamorous, fascinating individuals in the school of Athens. He's making philosophy itself look cool, desirable.
Okay, this is fascinating. And then there's this really wild idea from Marsilio Ficino, Lorenzo de' Medici's mentor, about love and beauty and sexiness.
Ah, yes, Ficino's theory. This is maybe the most intriguing intellectual nugget from the sources. He argued that love, the highest ideal, right, is first sparked by beauty.
Okay, makes sense.
But crucially, he said that beauty is often first encountered as physical attractiveness,
Yeah.
as well as sexiness.
Whoa. Okay, so where does that lead?
It leads to this incredible path he lays out.
Mm.
The journey to the highest ideals often starts with sex, which leads you to appreciate beauty, which then elevates you to love of wisdom, love of the good, love of God.
They didn't see a conflict between, like, earthly desires and higher goals.
Quite the opposite. They saw a connection, a pathway.
That's kind of revolutionary, isn't it? It means they could use all that powerful stuff, sexiness, lust, glamour, and celebrity, which we usually associate with, I don't know, selling handbags or status.
Right.
They could use all that energy to actually serve these really noble intellectual ambitions.
Exactly. Look at Botticelli. Think of his paintings like Primavera.
Uh-huh.
Those figures are incredibly alluring, right? Seductive, even.
Definitely.
But they're also thoughtful. They seem kind. There's a depth there. The genius move, according to this theory, was lining up basic human desire, wanting to be near beauty, wanting to be like those attractive figures with the desire to be good.
So because you find Venus alluring, you might also aspire to her wisdom or kindness.
That's the idea. They essentially weaponize beauty and desire for virtue, made the good stuff irresistible.
Okay, before we wrap up, we absolutely have to circle back to that controversy we mentioned at the start. The idea that maybe the Renaissance wasn't just this internal European flowering.
Right, the critical perspective.
Yeah.
And it's really important. Many historians now argue, pretty convincingly, that you can't understand the Renaissance without looking outside Europe. It was deeply connected to global factors.
Now trade.
Absolutely essential. The huge wealth of those Italian city-states.
Mm-hmm.
Venice, Genoa, Florence, where did it come from? A massive chunk came from trading with the Islamic world, especially the Ottoman Empire.
What were they trading?
Italians sold their famous textiles, glassware, metalwork, and they imported incredibly valuable goods, like spices, pepper was huge silks, and crucially, raw materials.
Raw materials like?
Like alum. This chemical dye mordant, absolutely vital for fixing those vibrant colors in Florentine cloth. Where did most of it come from? Anatolia, in the Ottoman Empire. Yeah. Until the Medici got lucky and found a source in Italy around 1460 and managed to get a monopoly, Florence was heavily reliant on Ottoman alum. So the very colors we associate with the Renaissance art depended on this trade.
Wow. Okay, so the money and the materials were linked globally. What about the ideas, the ad fontes thing?
Well, where did many of those Greek texts come from? They hadn't just been sitting in European monasteries for 1,000 years. Many, like works by Ptolemy, Aristotle, had been preserved, translated, and studied extensively in the Islamic world.
So the knowledge itself was often flowing from the East.
Often, yes, or preserved there. And then you have the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Lots of Byzantine Greek scholars fled the Ottomans and came to Italy bringing, guess what?
More ancient Greek manuscripts.
Exactly, another huge influx of classical knowledge.
Yeah.
Right when the humanists were most eager for it. It wasn't just Italians rediscovering things on their own. It was a much more complex exchange.
And this influence even reached into Renaissance science.
It seems likely. Get this. Copernicus. You know, the guy who put the sun at the center of the solar system? A towering figure of the scientific Renaissance.
Right.
He produced a diagram showing planetary motion. And it's so incredibly similar in its geometry to a proof worked out centuries earlier in an Islamic mathematics treatise. Well, the sources say it's almost impossible he didn't see it somehow.
That's amazing. So trade, knowledge, even scientific diagrams.
Deep
Connections.
connections. Which brings us back to that other uncomfortable point.
Mhm.
Even with all this genius happening, it really didn't happen for most people in Europe.
That 95% figure.
Yeah, it affected a tiny, tiny fraction of the population. The super wealthy merchants, the nobility, the church leaders, and the artists and thinkers they employed.
So for the average farmer or villager?
Life probably didn't change much. In some places, life expectancy actually went down during parts of this period. For the vast majority, their world was still shaped by the seasons, the local church, the feudal system. They likely never saw that opulent art or debated humanist philosophy. It was an elite phenomenon.
Okay, so putting this all together, what's the takeaway for us living now? We've seen the Medici showing the power of having a real vision for your money.
Philanthropy with a purpose?
We've seen the humanists like Bracciolini desperately seeking practical wisdom from the past to solve their present problems.
That urgency.
We've seen the Renaissance cities using beauty as a deliberate tool for social well-being, urbanism as philosophy,
Building a better society literally from the ground up.
and then Ficino and the artists using art, even sexiness, as this incredible form of advertising for high ideals.
Making wisdom attractive.
So the sources seem to conclude that honoring the Renaissance isn't about, ticking off museum visits or memorizing dates.
No, not just being dutiful tourists, as one source put it. It's about borrowing their way of seeing, using their eyes to look at our world.
A world where we arguably have more resources than ever, but maybe less of that focused vision.
That seems to be the challenge, doesn't it?
So the question for you listening is pretty clear. How do we do that now? How do we spend money more wisely with a real mission behind it? How do we make the humanities genuinely useful for improving our lives?
How do we build cities and public spaces that actually make people feel better?
And crucially, how do we use the power of art, design, beauty, all that stuff to make the good things genuinely desirable again? Maybe we should be trying to spark our own renaissance.
And maybe a final thought to chew on. Building on Ficino and Botticelli. Think about the big challenges we face today. Climate change, political division, disinformation, whatever high-minded goal you care about.
Yeah.
What could we achieve if we stopped letting beauty and sexiness be used just for vanity and silliness, as the source says? What if we deliberately harnessed all that incredible human charm, that magnetic power, and aimed it squarely at the public good? What could that look like today?